Leave a comment where you are listening in the world. Please subscribe if you enjoy our content. Enjoy! One time I joined a dating site, and I ended up with 6 dates in about a week's time with 3 different guys, something that otherwise usually didn't happen to me in a year's time. I was recently laid off from a 13 years career as a system engineer and had a nice severance with some free time for the first time in my life. I was exploring hobbies and new careers options and had seen a relationship both kind of peter out due to him being a workaholic and then end explosively due to a betrayal of a common friend, also losing a few close friends in the process. So it was a time in my life where I was willing to make some big changes and try something new. I had always considered mini golf a good first date, as it wasn't very strenuous like hiking can be, but allowed us to talk more than a loud night club or movie would. It was also a daytime date where I could meet someone, so it was a pretty safe dating environment. Finally, I believed that I could learn a lot about a guy playing a game of mini golf. For example, see whether he automatically got my ball out of a water trap or if he hesitated or expected me to take care of it. This guy, Michael, contacted me on the dating site. He happened to be a software engineer at the same corporation I had formerly worked at. It was one of the biggest companies in town. However, unlike me, his department had not been bought out and he wasn't laid off. He was about 7 or so years older than I, late 40s, and had a nice head of grayish hair. We exchanged photos, as well as chatted online or the phone some before setting up a date. I knew he had a good job related to computers, and we shared a lot of the same hobbies: tabletop gaming, video gaming, hiking, etc. When I was younger, I had always thought I would marry a man named Michael/Mike, as it was my favorite guy name. Michael liked my mini golf idea, as he told me he did some regular golfing in his spare time, and he had a favorite golf course, which was attached to a mini golf course. So we set a mid-afternoon date on his day off. I arrived at the golf course a few minutes early and start walking through the parking lot to the front gate. Walking towards me is someone who looks like Michael, walking fast, head down and a bag of clubs over his shoulder and more in his hand. As I pass this person, I stop, smile and ask, "Michael?" He barely nods his head, keeps walking and says nothing. I turn on my heels and walk after him. I'm thinking, what happened? Did he decide to bail out of the date and I caught him before he could get to his car? But I ask, "You are Michael, right?" By this time we are both at his car, and he has opened his trunk. He drops the bag of clubs in his trunk, and he drops in the other clubs in his hand, keeping just one. I think it was a putter. He still has barely acknowledged me, and I notice he is still avoiding eye contact. He is looking straight down and won't turn his head. I'm thinking, oh boy, I think he is running away, but again I ask, "You are Michael, right?" And he nods more, acting sort of annoyed that I didn't accept the first nod as confirmation. I don't know if I caught him bolting or what is going on, so I try to make small talk. "You look like your picture. I thought that was you." He turns without making eye contact and starts to walk back towards the mini golf gate with his head down. "I got here early to hit some balls around," he says, and I turn on my heels again to try to keep up with him as he determinedly walks back to the business gate. I'm almost running to keep up with him. Admittedly, he's about a foot taller than I am, but that's not so unusual. What is unusual is that I get the distinct feeling he thinks he's in a hostage situation, and he's trying to get the date over as fast as possible. I'm about ready to tell him, obviously this was a mistake somehow. We really don't have to go through with the date, and we can just go our own separate ways right now. However, it was all I could do to try to keep up with him, much less get that whole thing out while he stayed in one spot. We get to the front gate, and he purchases 2 mini golf passes, and the guy behind counter shows him a box of colored mini golf balls. We each take one. Then the guy behind the counter moves down to the club selection area and says for us to each to select a mini golf club. At this point Michael says he is going to use the real golf club he brought, rather than the miniature golf club, and he lifts it into the air. The guy behind the counter stifles a laugh and shrugs, saying, "Okay." I don't know anything about real golf, but even I can see how different the big head, mostly colored plastic mini golf club is to the sleek titanium Real golf club Michael was carrying. I take a club matching the color of ball I took, and I decide this might be the world's fastest game of mini golf, as he might just be trying to get through this date as quickly as possible. Still, there was no reason not to try to enjoy ourselves, so I relaxed and just started making the usual small talk. Any question I asked Michael was met with a long pause, and then usually a yes or no answer, although I was asking open-ended questions. I fought my natural instinct to fill the awkward silences with nervous laughter and comments, At the same time, I tried to balance my questions to him with my own information. However, it still felt like I was grilling a captive. Michael still hadn't made eye contact with me, and his head was perpetually bent without turning his head to the left or right. I again debated about asking him if he really wanted to go through with this, but he already seemed so embarrassed. We approached the first hole. He gestured for me to go first, so I put down my ball and hit it. It goes partly towards the hole. Michael puts down his ball and poses for a swing, and totally misses the ball. I immediately stifle a laugh, keeping up the small talk, trying not to notice that he completely missed the ball with his tiny sleek putter. He motions for me to go again, and I stop and ask if he wanted to go again first, as his ball was the furthest. I stopped myself in mid-sentence, choking down the words, and approached my ball, casually hitting it, and it goes in the hole. I pick my mini golf ball out of the hole, cringing as he prepares to go again. This time I remain silent, not to break his concentration when he is preparing to hit the ball, and I continue to auto-silence myself each time he gets up to swing from then on. Michael hits the ball, too hard this time, and it goes zooming off the green and into a different mini golf feature. He's obviously red-faced now as he chases after the ball, picks it up and puts it down on the course, closest to where it left it. He takes another swing and misses the ball. Par is only 3, but he immediately swings again and hits the ball. It ricochets off the cement rim of the course and goes the opposite direction. He slinks off to retrieve his ball, stopping at the stand next to our course to mark par/3 for his score on the little paper sheet and a 2 for me. I started to suggest that maybe he would want to swap his golf club for the mini golf club before we went on to the next hole, and he just shook his head no. The other 17 holes went pretty much the same for us. I played my usual game except that I hit a hole in one on one of the holes. Michael either couldn't hit the mini golf ball, or tore up the turf, or hit the ball so hard that it wildly ricocheted off the course and onto another one. He obviously had no control of the mini golf ball with the real golf club he had, but he wasn't going to admit defeat by swapping it out for a regular mini golf club. He never made eye contact with me, and never moved his head side to side, even to check out shots he would set up, which was another reason his shots never got near the holes. A couple of times I called him Mike, and he immediately corrected me that his name was Michael. I'm usually good at small talk, at drawing shy people out of their shells, making them comfortable, and getting people to talk. However, nothing I tried really worked with Michael for very long. I figured he was just trying to get what had to be a miserable experience over as fast as he could, so I tried to move things along myself. I did ask Michael some of my usual dating questions, and he gave me some brief answers, like, what do you like to do in your free time? He said playing Xbox. I actually had played that with friends before many times, and so I asked if he played with friends, and he answered that he had no friends. This kind of shocked me as I'm a very social person, so I asked about what Xbox games he played. It seemed they were mostly shooters. He had also said he liked board games on his profile, so I asked about which ones he liked. He named a few of the Euros, but said he didn't know anyone to play them with. He never really opened up, partly because every hole he had the constant failure at hitting the ball, pretty much taking par on every hole after a few times of missing it or whacking it out of the course. I tried to be as friendly as I could be, and not notice him failing each hole, as I knew he was getting more and more embarrassed by not being able to hit any ball properly, or even getting one eventually into the hole. When my ball landed in the water trap, he seemed unsure what to do. Get it for me as a gentleman. Plus he was a foot taller, and he could reach it without getting wet, or let me struggle to get it myself. When I saw him hesitate, I good naturally went in after it myself, getting my tennis shoes wet. I thought it was the least I could do to keep moving things forward. Finally, the game of mini golf came to an end, and as we walked to turn in my club, I thanked him for the game, exclaiming how much fun it was, carefully hinting that I needed to get going. But it was great fun, really, thanks so much. I figured there was no sense saying anything except pleasantries, as obviously we weren't a match for each other. But the date could be over now, and we could go our separate ways. I was still a little insecure as I didn't know what was wrong with me from the beginning, so that he wanted to get through this date so fast. But despite looking good on paper, Michael seemed very dull to me. So we walked back to our cars while I chatted on about whatever I could think of to fill the time, and I made a hasty retreat out of there. But that wasn't the end of it. That night I got a message from Michael thanking me for the date and saying how much fun he had. He seemed like a totally different person again than the one I met that afternoon. He mentioned he would like to see me again and asked if I would be available later that week. I was dumbfounded. Michael seemed like a different person online. he seemed charming and friendly. So I thought maybe he was just shy. I used to be shy as a kid, so I knew how that felt. Maybe this afternoon was a disaster, but maybe the next date would be better. And maybe this afternoon would be something we'd laugh and tell our grandkids about someday. I attended a regular board gaming night Thursday night. We had started out as strangers who all came together years ago to do a hobby we all enjoyed and ended up casual friends. Everyone was welcome there, and I had brought over a few friends over the years. So I thought maybe I could take Michael over to these friends for board gaming Thursday night. Maybe a group activity would be a less awkward date than something one-on-one, and I could get my friend's perceptions of what was going on with him. I suggest to him, and I had planned on meeting Michael somewhere on the way, so he didn't have to walk up to the door and ring the bell alone. However, when I gave him the time and address, he said he would meet me there. That sounded reasonable, since the house was actually only a couple of miles from where I used to work, and he currently worked. However, when Thursday evening came, I got a call from Michael. He asked what highway to take to get to the family's house. And I replied there was no need to get on the interstate as the house was only a couple of miles from his work. Just go down a main street, name, and turn onto street name, and drive up to house number. Michael oddly replied, surely there is a highway that goes to their house. And I was baffled. Why would a highway take someone to another person's house? Directly to a person's house? Especially when it was only a couple of miles from where he was starting at, and any highway was twice that distance away. I just went over the directions again, knowing he had a Google map, and asked if he was sure he didn't want to meet me somewhere, so he could follow me over to their house. He said no and told me he would see me there, but seemed agitated, but at least he seemed to be talking pretty well. I arrived 30 minutes before I had told Michael to arrive, as I wanted to be there when he arrived so he wouldn't feel awkward around strangers. The hosts have a modern house with a great room, table space on the dining room table, a folding table in the living room, and another coffee table over by the fireplace on the other side of the great room. When I arrived, I found Michael already there and playing a board game with some of the regulars. He seemed to be having a great time, and he joked and talked to the players at the table just fine. I only later on realized that everyone at his table was a middle-aged male. As I came, one of my friends started to introduce Michael as a new member. I smiled and said we knew each other, and I had invited him to the board gaming tonight. I said hello to everyone, and made some small talk as I went into the great room to greet everyone else. Michael seemed a little awkward saying hi to me, but he also seemed really involved in the game. I wandered around greeting everyone and seeing what they were playing, and found out Michael was about 20 minutes into an 1.5-hour game. He had to arrive at least 30 minutes before myself. I was struck as how sociable and relaxed Michael seemed. He made normal eye contact with the players at the table. Maybe he was just shy around women. Maybe the real one-on-one date was a lot of pressure for him. I got into a short game, timing it so I'd be free when Michael was done. The guys, including Michael, returned to the main great room so we could recombine for some other gaming, and I let two groups go off to play games, so that there was just Michael, myself, and Beth, the wife of the couple who were hosting. Beth suggested we play a 3-player game. Michael didn't know any of them that were out, so we finally settled on a board game called Elfenland, which Beth and I knew we could teach, and Michael said he was willing to try. Michael was acting kind of awkward again, but Beth is such a good hostess, and she carried half of the conversation, while I carried the other half, so it seemed less awkward. Beth began by explaining the board game to Michael as we set it up. Her and her husband hosted gaming each week, and she has 4 school-age kids, so she does a great job of explaining things. After a while, Michael said that we should just start playing as he will learn as he plays, since Beth and I already knew the rules. This actually isn't that unusual, as some people like myself learn by playing and can pick up on patterns quickly, so going over all kinds of rules ahead of time can be a waste of time. However, not knowing Michael's playing style, Beth tries to explain a little more, and Michael says, let's just play, so we both shrug and start playing the game. Shortly into the game, Michael tries to do a maneuver, and Beth tells him he can't do it because of a certain rule. Michael seems annoyed and says, but I didn't know that, to which Beth replies, I was trying to tell you earlier, and she tries to explain. Michael states fine, in an angry tone, and ends up doing something different. A couple of minutes later the same thing happens, and again and again. Eventually Beth is both a little annoyed, and also kind of laughing as Michael keeps getting upset he can't do something in the game, but he doesn't want to listen to the rules, even when Beth tries to give him the specific rules for whatever he is trying to do at that point. I'm starting to get embarrassed as the environment we game in is very good-natured and friendly. People do not get mad when they lose or get blocked. Yet this game is getting kind of heated. Finally, Michael tries to do a final maneuver, and he is blocked. He gets upset and says how he didn't know that could be done. To which Beth replies nicely that she has tried to explain the rules to him all this time, but he didn't want to listen and just wanted to play the game. The board game ends and Michael seems a little miffed. He hasn't made eye contact with me since I walked in the door. He's pretty much kept his eyes on the board most of the time, as he doesn't seem to make eye contact with Beth either. I can't tell if this is due to shyness or aggression. He says he has to leave as it's getting late. It's about 11 p.m., so I walk him to the door and say, I was glad he could come by. I hope he had fun, and he should feel welcome to come back again another time. However, I actually feel like this night was also sort of a disaster, as he and I had no interaction besides playing a board game with a third party, and he seemed to have an awful time. He shyly mumbles something and leaves. Beth doesn't seem to notice when the game ends that I walk with Michael to the door as her husband's game ends at the same time, and he asks her as he goes in for a hug, Hey babe, how did it go? And I hear Beth saying to him, Geez, where did that guy come from? He didn't want to know the rules, but then got angry he didn't know the rules, laugh. Beth is this really gracious woman who was raised as a finishing school in Europe as her father was military, so it's odd to see her annoyed. I don't say anything about Michael, and just slip into playing another game, and I figure that's the end of it. However, it still isn't. I get another message from Michael saying how much fun he had, and asking when I could see him again. I figure what the heck is going on? Does he really think these are good dates? I can be sympathetic that he is painfully shy or whatever his problem is, but I'm not having fun, and he is really dull. At the time, I rarely went on more than 2 dates with anyone unless I really was interested in them, which wasn't anyone on any of the dating services. So I decided to not answer his email. A day later he called me up, and I let it go to mail. He mentioned wanting to get together to show me how to play Magic the Gathering, which was a 2-person card game I had mentioned I had never learned to play, which was popular. I never called him back. A few YRS later I ran a local aboard gaming site, and a woman joined whose last name was the same as Michael's. She mentioned in her profile that she was always trying to get her brother to socialize more, as all he wanted to do is play video games on his time off. A couple of times later on I bumped into Michael, now with a beard, attending a gaming meetup I was filling in for a friend to run. We never spoke, but he probably recognized me. So to sum up, guy with an apparent paralyzing fear of females, and no personality keeps asking for another date, even after we have a totally miserable experience. I believe he tried to be impressive with skill, but he went overboard and embarrassed himself each time. Around the same time, I had a long phone call which never turned into a date, as frankly I was totally weirded out by the call. But it was sort of like a train wreck in that I couldn't pull myself away. The guy mentioned that he moved here, flyover country, recently from CA, and his car was stolen from the parking lot of his work nearby during the day. So I would have to drive when we went out as he was without a car, and it would be a while before he would get the insurance money to replace his car. Okay. Then he goes into a long story that sounded like the plot of Goodfellas, or The Godfather, of how he used to be involved with the mafia in CA, WTF, and how his lovely wife had been targeted when he tried to break away from the mafia. She was killed in a car crash/explosion on the 101, and he fled the state. Really, WTF? He suspected that his car was stolen by the CA mafia, who might have tracked him down. He also was a writer. He had a story about his own custom D&D Fantasyland, which rivaled Tolkien in his opinion, and he was getting it published. Before we even met, he emailed me the entire book, which was a huge file back in 2008. Right after the phone call, I escalated his and my status to where I would totally drop off the radar and not answer email or mail at all, which I usually did after a couple of bad dates. He didn't take the hint even after several weeks went by of him calling and emailing and getting no reply. During this time his messages became more and pleading and wistful, once stating, I'm getting the idea that you don't want to talk to me, laugh. And then please get back to me. I want to make sure you are okay and haven't met with a horrible demise. Ominous. I had many experiences on dating sites, a few weird situations here and there, the odd catfish, but most of them pretty good. This one is still quite fresh, but it has been by far the worst experience on a dating site, and it has left me sick to my stomach. It's a lot to read, so sit down with a hot cup of tea or whatever preferred beverage. So I matched with this guy, Jay, and we had an awesome conversation right away, great chemistry and all that, and we hit it off pretty quick. He mentioned he had kids, and they would always come first, which is not a problem for me at all. I assumed that he wasn't with the mother of his children anymore, as he was working and living 3 hours away from them. I actually found it admirable that he still made time for his kids every week to see them, even though he had a crazy work schedule. We talked for several weeks through text and phone calls, and he was the sweetest, attentionate funny. He would send me pictures of him and his kids having fun, and it made my heart melt. My pastime is to paint cute portraits, and he asked me to paint his kids, which I gladly accepted. By then I was pretty keen to meet him, and when the first date came I was super happy and excited. It was the cutest date. We played some board games in the car and ate popcorn next to a lake, talked until late together in the car. While we were talking, his phone was pinging quite a lot, and at one point he reached to look at the messages. And I didn't mean to glance, but the corner of my eye caught a text message from Princess. The girl in me of course was alarmed, but hey, I thought, we are only on the first date, and we haven't known each other for so long. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt, and don't ask questions otherwise he will think you are crazy. So I shoved that on the back of my head and continued staying in contact with him. He would take news every day and talk about him and what he wanted. Explained to me that there was never any love in his marriage, so that's why it was over now. But he was looking for real love, a connection, someone to be with, etc. But he would always put his kids first. He said how the most important thing for him was honesty and communication. I thought how cool that he's got the vulnerability to talk about this to me. I was quite flattered, and my heart melted further. Now comes the second date. He asked me if I'd be keen to come up to his place, and even offered to pay for my gas money. I declined the money, but I thought it was really thoughtful of him. So jumped in my car and did the 3H trip to see him. We spent a lovely time together, and of course we ended up having sex. He seemed quite nervous, and I won't go into details, but there was some malfunction in the system. Honestly, I didn't care. I thought it was quite sweet actually. And guess what? Yes, my heart melted again. I just wanted to give all my TLC to this sweet, loving guy that goes through a hard work schedule to provide for his children. He went out of his way to come and see me at my place, when he had already a couple hours drive from his kid's place, and 3 hours left to drive to get home. It made me feel really special and appreciated. We continued to stay in contact, but what I shoved at the back of my head came back. This guy is too good to be true. My gut feeling was telling me that the whole thing smelled fishy and weird. I couldn't forget the princess text, and he actually never mentioned divorce. He would just call the mother of his children the ex. Still went back to see him. We went for a walk, and he told me about his upcoming trip to Brazil in a month and a half. And I thought that it was so good for him to get some time for himself for once. We went to the post office to renew his passport and all that stuff. He opened up about his situation, how he was actually currently in the process of divorcing his wife. I thought that it was very strange he didn't mention that before, but thought that hey, fair enough, it's a quite difficult subject to talk about. When we were back in the car, I had his phone in my hands to choose some music, and bing, comes a message from a lovely looking girl from Instagram. Hey babe, I hope you had a good rest. That wasn't his ex-wife. My heart just skipped a beat, and I went cold. He noticed, and asked what was wrong, what he did wrong. I couldn't get a word out of my mouth. Now guys, you're probably going to tell me, hey, he never promised you anything, which is true, but I can't help it, I'm a girl. It is imprinted in my genes, I guess, but I just want to be loved and cherished. So when we came home, I was quite emotional, and I told him that okay, he didn't promise anything, and it hasn't been so long we've been dating, but if his thing is to have several girls in his life, great for him. I'm not there to judge, but it's not my thing and I don't want to be a part of it. I told him that this message reminded me of a very bad memory from when I found out my first love cheated on me. He looked at me and he was very understanding. He told me that he wanted to fix this. He would delete the girls that were talking to him. I told him it wasn't my point. If he is involved with those girls, I can't stop him from doing so, but I can stop myself from seeing him. He looked at me in the eyes and told me how he was someone that wanted just one person in his life, and that he was seating next to her right now. I wanted to believe him, so I did. He sounded so genuine. Later on in the evening, I still saw a message on the corner of my eye to Princess about a renewal of something, but my stupid ass just ignored it and thought he was probably calling his daughter like this or something. If you are still reading me, we are now close to the end of the story. I was trusting and happy to go see him again a couple of weeks later. So I did, and when I came over he wasn't there, but he had left the door open for me. He was still working at some friends, so he wouldn't be back for about 3 hours. I made myself comfortable, went to take something in the fridge, and then I saw on his calendar, only a month and a half until I can see C. Right away all the dots connected. We girls are pretty nifty at finding out who is who, and it was fairly easy to find out that C lives in Brazil, and is the one that sent the "Hey babe, I hope you had a good rest" message. I'm also pretty sure that she was the princess contact on his phone. They were talking about the passport renewal. Funny enough, she looks like a more beautiful version of myself. I was extremely disappointed, so sent him a message to tell him I saw the calendar and connected all the dots, and that I understood he was going to see someone important to him in Brazil. But I was sorry, I couldn't go further in this, as I've been quite clear that it's not my thing to share. I was packing my stuff back and searching for a hotel room when he answered back. He told me I was right, and he was sorry, he had been selfish, but we could remain friends if I wanted. Then something about how I deserved better and whatnot. I didn't answer back. I thought, how can I be friends with someone that lied with such ease? And if he lied about this, maybe he is lying about the divorce? I don't want to be friends. I went up in the room to gather the rest of my stuff, and noticed the envelope that I used to give him the painting I did for him. Inside was the painting, along with a picture of him and his wife. I took the painting and thought that I didn't want my art to be part of this guy's life, so ripped it, threw it in the bin and left. I was sick to my stomach, and so angry with myself for ignoring my gut feeling. You guys will probably tell me that you saw it coming from the beginning. I reckon I did as well, but I'm an expert at giving the benefit of the doubt. He was so lovely, cute, and huggable. He gave me the perfect performance of this sweet, vulnerable, unsure about his looks, self-conscious, and hard-working guy. I just wanted it to work. If you read me till the end, thank you. It feels good and takes a weight off my chest. Gotta work on red flag busting now. Oh dear. This happened to me just last week. I am on the Bumble dating app. I accepted a date with a guy on there who coincidentally happened to be a brother of a guy I have known casually for a few years. This mistakenly made me feel he must be safe and normal. I allowed this person to pick me up from my house. Huge mistake. One of the first questions he asked me is, "Are you racist?" I replied, "No, I don't feel I am." "Why?" He replied, he is not racist, but he doesn't like airs. At first, I thought I heard wrong. I did not. For the rest of the evening, much of his conversation consisted of using the N-word repeatedly, coupled with questions asking me if I had ever dated an. He said he could never date a woman who had F. Ked 1. He was also overly hyperactive. I believe he might have been on something like speed, or something else. Honestly, I have no idea. He showed me screenshots of pics and comments from my private Instagram. He criticized my photos, and said I posted them for attention. He told me he Googled and researched me. He said he did not like the thought of any woman of his receiving comments on her photos by airs. He loved using the N-word. I asked how he was able to obtain any photos since my Instagram is private. His answer was because he is ex-military. He proceeded to tell me about men he had killed in Iraq at point-blank range during Operation Freedom. He also announced he wanted me to post only photos of him and I on my social media accounts. He asked what I was doing the next day, and I said I am busy. The following day I received a text from this racist maniac saying he's sitting in his vehicle in my driveway. I texted back I am not home, and I am disturbed to hear he is in my driveway. I explained I didn't want to see him anymore. He replied with several long texts begging me to be with him, telling me I am beautiful and amazing. He said he found and kept 2 strands of my hair. He spoke as if we had been dating for months. When I said I barely know you, please stop, he replied he would. He did not. I received more pleading text messages. Then I received a text asking to just hang out as friends. I said, no. We are 2 very different people, and it's best we don't see each other at all. He then replied with very mean name calling, and telling me I am fat. He called me Miss Piggy. LOL, he said 4 people had told him I am a fat bitch. He said he has $750K in the bank, and that was not enough to feed me. He told me to F off. I hope I will never hear from him again. I have saved all the texts from this man in case he ever shows up at my house again. I have them to show to the police. I have blocked him on all my sites, and hopefully he won't see this or anything else connected to me. This one Bumble date was definitely with a scary dude. Asterisk, I want to add that after this very upsetting experience, I deleted my profile on that dating app and have not been on any dating sites since. After my divorce, I tried a couple of dating sites for about 3 months total, and was not pleased with the quality of any of the men I encountered. After all I have been through, I have taken a complete break from socializing, and it has remained this way since January. CH and I had been on several dates. We'd met for movies and frozen yogurt and board games. These have gone well. So this was to be the next important test, drinks at a bar with some of my wonderful, if drama-queening friends. I knew that CH had a good mind, but the soul is more important. We are what we do. Here's what we did that night. 7 p.m. I arrive at the bar. This was a relatively impromptu date, so CH hasn't arrived yet. Fortunately, I know other people and start catching up. 7:30, I'm on my second scotch and soda. Life is good, and I feel no pain. I start catching up with D, and learn that she was just laid off. Ouch. But after 20 years at the job, she got an excellent severance package, a year's pay. So her plan to take the summer off and job search in the fall seems good to me. 7:45 I get bumped into and drop scotch number 3. I decide to cool it with the booze. Dia's had a few shots and decides that her next job will be executive director of notoriously drama-filled organization. I suggest that she could probably do it, but warn her that, 1, she might be too sane, and 2, there are a lot of drama queens to deal with. She asserts that she can handle it. It'd be interesting to see her do the job. 8 o'clock CH arrives. He'd swung by another bar first, and was also feeling no pain. He brought his new book with him, and Coulter's Demonic. Much as I like right-wing politics, this is a bad omen. 8:30 CH and MW argue. MW simply wants to assert that Coulter is bad and move on. CH, however, challenges him to make a statement about what she's written. MW, clearly flustered, goes off on tangents. CH sticks to the topic like a pit bull with a thigh bone. 9 o'clock CH and MW are still beating the dead horse, as I tell them, so I talk to other people. I've missed MD a lot, and it's good that he's back and in town. The two of us snark about the silliness going on around us. 9:30 CH and MW are still haggling. B drops on by. He eggs on the conflict. I'm still drinking club soda, and my head has cleared up somewhat. I start chatting with a few of CH's friends who are in the bar that night, A and S. L joins us and talks real estate. 10 o'clock MW complains about CH berating him about politics. Given that MW cannot ever say what he feels, I suggest that next time he tells someone that he really doesn't feel like talking about the subject and move on. I try to change the subject then, but MW keeps complaining. I tell him that the horse is long dead and to stop beating it. He complains more. I tell him that if snivels one more sentence about in Coulter, I'll switch from horse beating to MW beating. He lurches out the door. 10:30 B and CH start arguing over in Coulter. B attempts to wrestle the book out of CH's hands, and a drink gets smashed on the ground. I pull out my flashlight to help with the cleanup. 10:45 S and I start chatting as B and CH start peacemaking. Apparently having a flashlight in your pocket attracts a certain kind of guy. He's studying to be a forensic accountant, which is something I know about thanks to paralegal work and e-discovery. It's a nice chat, and I get his number. Yes, I'm sort of on a date with someone else. I figured, correctly, that things were going south quickly. Future dates were seeming as probable as a Newt Gingrich presidency. 11 o'clock CH decides to go to a bar where he's been banned. A bouncer there doesn't much care for his antics. I suggest we do something else, but he insists. You gotta dance with them as Brungya, goes the saying. 11:15 he goes on ahead. I chat with MD before he goes home. He and B keep snarking about our mutual friends and each other. I wish us good night. 11:20 I head over to the other bar. It seems quiet. I go upstairs and have another club soda. CH and I chat, but it's hard to hear over the loud music. His bouncer finds him and drags him outside. I follow, concerned. 11:25 in the street, which is brighter than the bar, I can see that the bouncer has massive shoulders, which imply some serious gym time, and bitch tits, which imply some serious steroid abuse. He looks to be in the midst of roid rage. He goes over to a nearby cop and demands that she arrest CH. 11:30, I watch from across the street. I can't hear what CH said, but he says something that makes the female cop slam her hands on the hood of her car. She talks into a walkie-talkie. Soon we have 8 cop cars around us. Clearly, this boy is a threat. 11:35 L comments that really, while all this commotion is going on in the relatively nice part of town we're in, we've probably had a homicide or 2 in the hood. Our friend CA comes by and wonders why he can't get this kind of police response when his car gets broken into. I ask how often that happens. He says every 3 months or so. 1140L wants to go tell the police what he thinks. I suggest this would be a bad idea, but if he wants to bail CH out of jail, he ought to. Lloyd gives me a business card, and I go up to where CH is studiously ignoring the police by reading in Coulter while they stand around him. Reading a book in front of cops seems to be his way of avoiding disorderly conduct charges. A cop informs me that my friend is too busy to talk. I agree and simply mention that a mutual friend has offered to bail him out. I show the man the card, resist saying that I didn't have time to bake a hacksaw into it, and hand it to CH. I thanked the officer for his time, patience, and service and went back across the street. 11:45 I chat with the bouncer, whose name is Tom. He's calmed down somewhat, and it becomes clear that he and CH are like Dennis the Menace and Mr. Wilson. He seems like an okay type. I also chat with the female police officer, Officer Goodwin. She has a tattoo in an elegant script that reads Faith, One Way, and Hope when looked at upside down. I compliment her on her good taste. 11:50 the cops have nothing, and CH gets off with a warning. I walk him over to the subway. He explains that he loves a challenge. I suggest that controlling his own behavior would be a good challenge. He seems uninterested in it. We walk in stone silence. He apologizes. I tell him not to apologize unless he's sincere. He says that he's sincere, and I say he's grinning too much. He thanks me for staying, and says that most dates would have gone away. I explain that I have notoriously poor judgment about such matters, and that I wanted to be a witness in case he got beaten up. He said that such things don't happen. I suggest he try saying that to a room full of working-class black people. He thanks me for getting him to the subway. My last words, good night, knucklehead. Probably my worst 2 dates were with one girl in particular. This was a few years after my first marriage had ended. In this period I had been on lots of awkward dates, lots of lovely dates, but never had anywhere I really clicked with anyone. Anyway, a friend suggested I should go out with a friend of hers. She was sure we'd be a great match, so she gave each other our email addresses. She lived in a city around 70 miles away, so we emailed and called each other quite a few times over a couple of weeks and seemed to get along quite well. So we decided to meet up and go on our first date. She said that the coming weekend she had a friend's birthday party to go to and suggested that I be her and friend. The party was being held at a restaurant in the city where she lived, and it was decided that I would meet her there. I arrived. She texted me she was running late, but she was with the guest of honor, so it wouldn't start until she arrived. Eventually she arrived with the birthday girl, my ex-wife. Well, that was awkward. I am ex and I hadn't parted on good terms, and we hadn't seen or talked to each other for about 5 years. I suggested I should leave, but my date said she wanted me to stay. I remained polite, as did my ex, but it kind of put a damper on the evening. It turned out my date and my ex had been childhood friends, had fallen out of touch, and had encountered each other only a few months prior. Consequently, my date knew nothing about us having been married. After the evening, my ex briefly spoke with me, and apologized for wrecking our marriage and for all the heartache she caused, that she hoped we could be friendly, and wished my date and I well. My ex suggested we should get along well. Okay, so after the initial shock, the evening ended on a positive note. I didn't really get to know my date at all, but at least I had some closure on some bad stuff in my past. The next week, I was invited to another party with my date. This was pretty uneventful, and to be honest, I can't really remember any of it. I was getting along well with this girl, but still hadn't had any alone time with her. So the following weekend we decided to go out for lunch on the Saturday. This is where things went pear-shaped. I was to pick her up, but she wouldn't give me her address. She said her place was hard to find, so I should first go to a particular strip mall, call her once I was there, and then she'd give the directions to her place. So once I arrived there, instead of giving me directions, she told me to wait there, and she would meet me there. Okay, this was a big warning sign, but I went along with it. I had to wait for nearly an hour, and got to the point where I decided I would leave if she didn't show up by a certain time. She arrived just before the deadline. She arrived, but had a friend with her. Apparently that's why she was late. She hadn't seen the friend for ages, and she happened to drop in this morning, so she invited her along. This was supposed to be our first date with just the two of us, but not to be. She seemed to have issues about being alone together, but maybe the story was true. Anyway, I suggested we all jump in my car, a large luxury saloon car. But she insisted we take her car, and I had to ride in the back. Her car was an old Mazda. It was a mess inside, had no air conditioning, springs were coming out of the back seat. It was horrid. In retrospect, I should have told her not to bother right there, but I went along. She decided that we would go to a swanky restaurant in a resort town about 50 miles away. So off we went, with her and her friend in the front, and me in the back. Her and her friend talked the whole way, with absolutely no conversation including me. Not that I could have been included. The noise in the car was so bad that I couldn't hear anything they said anyway. We got to the restaurant, and again her and her friend talked the whole time. I was only included in the conversation occasionally. I may as well have not been there. Well, I was there for one thing. Her and her friend left me to pick up the bill, for all three of us. The return trip was a mirror of the trip down, except my mind was absolutely made up that I wasn't going to bother seeing this girl again. So we get back to the strip mall. Thank goodness my car was still there unharmed, as it was a dodgy area. And she says to me that we need to talk. Okay. She starts by telling me that she really enjoys my company, but that I'm too demanding on her time. What? That I can't expect to see her every weekend, and she thinks it best that we stop seeing each other. At this point I'm just agreeing with her, because I really didn't want to see her again, and if she's breaking up, not that we had anything to break up from, then as far as I'm concerned she's saving me the hassle. Inside I'm happy, outside I'm trying to look a bit disappointed but agreeing with her. But, when she said we stop seeing each other, she hadn't finished her sentence. She didn't mean stop seeing each other completely. She meant stop seeing each other as regularly because she was planning our wedding for June the following year, so we had heaps of time to see each other before then. To say I was dumbfounded is the understatement of the century. I didn't know what to say, and didn't say anything. I just got in my car and drove home in shock. We had been on 3 dates, had never spent any alone time together. I didn't even consider that we were an item. Definitely not engaged. After I got home, I didn't contact her, and she didn't contact me, so I figured maybe she was just trying to shock me out of her life. I was happy, had started seeing someone else, and had pretty much forgotten about crazy fiancé lady. Until some 6 months later, I was at a function, and she happened to be there. I politely said hello, and her response was literally, "Hi. Did you know there's a ball on next Friday night at venue? I'd love to go, but I refused to be asked out a week before. Oh, there's friend, bye." I thought it was weird, but didn't think any more of it. That is until about 11 p.m. the next Friday night, when the phone rang. "How dare you stand me up?" "Huh. I waited all night at the ball, but you didn't show up." "I never said I was going. You're a terrible boyfriend for doing that to me. I've devoted 6 months of my life to you, and you can't even take one night out for me. I don't want to break up with you, but maybe we should." Yeah, maybe we should." In the middle of sobbing I was called every bad name under the sun, before she hung up. That was more than 10 years ago, and thankfully haven't seen or heard from her since. Before I got married, I tried my hand at using dating apps for the first time. My main reasoning was that I did not have a lot of spare time to actually meet anyone outside of my industry, so I thought it would help me getting exposure to people I would not necessarily meet otherwise in real life. I met this guy, who we will call Bob, on Bumble, and we exchanged a few polite messages. He seemed nice and the stereotypical guy who enjoyed boating, beer and cigars. He would pressure me to meet him for drinks out, stating that statistically people who chatted on the dating apps without actually meeting within 2 weeks of matching would probably be likely to never meet. I had a date already scheduled the evening he was trying to meet with me, but still he insisted. I was honest and let him know that I had a date later, and he claimed that he did not care, as he still wanted to meet. 2 dates in one night was not something that I had ever engaged in, but he seemed so adamant about meeting quickly. So I agreed to meet him at the local brewery for a drink prior to my date. When I showed up, his first comment was that he was surprised that I had such an athletic build. Odd, but I didn't necessarily think anything super off about it, as my calves are typically more muscular than most men's, after years of dance training and kickboxing. We sat down and had a drink. He was engaged in conversation, and I could see from his eyes that he seemed very interested. He laughed and had a good sense of humor. Things were going well, but I was keeping a watchful eye on the time. Eventually my other date for the evening called, and his picture flashed across my screen. Bob asked if that was my date later, and I replied that he was. I thanked him for a good time, and we headed towards the door of the brewery. He seemed shocked that I would still go on my other date, given that we seemed to hit it off, and there was actually chemistry. I felt bad leaving, but I hate canceling prior commitments at the last minute. Bob immediately went in for a kiss, and surprisingly, he was a good kisser. He stepped back and said that he would talk to me later. I went on the second date that evening, and we met at a restaurant for dinner. It was pleasant, but we did not have the same chemistry as Bob and I had. We parted ways that evening, and decided to just stay friends on social media. Bob would friend me on Facebook and immediately started liking my posts regularly. He messaged me and told me that he was heading to Germany for Oktoberfest, but that he wanted to see me again once he got back into town. He even kept in contact with messages and pictures from his travels while he was gone, as we shared that common interest. He invited me to go with him to a Dia de la Muerte party at the local art and fashion gallery when he returned from his travels. I told him that he needed to come over prior to the event that evening, so that I could paint his face as we could go as a coordinated couple. Coincidentally, I knew the owner of the gallery and was able to procure 2 tickets to the sold-out event, so I wanted to go dressed in the theme of the event. As I painted his face, he shared that he was always self-conscious of his acne scars, and I told him that his skin was not as bad as he thought, and he probably noticed it more than anyone else would have. I was surprised that he had shared a little insecurity with me, as he seemed a little reserved with information thus far. I was surprised when we pulled up to the venue. He proceeded to park in the handicapped spot and even pulled out a placard. He didn't explain it, nor did I ask who the handicapped person was. We made a quick cameo at the event, as we made the rounds as I said my hellos to the people that I knew at the event. He also knew some of the people, as he used to own several coffee shops in the local area, in addition to being a local firefighter. He loved all of the compliments he received from random strangers on how authentic our costumes and makeup were. We had plans to go to dinner after the event at a local Mexican restaurant that would have appreciated our authentic garb, while not batting an eye at our appearance. Instead, he walked quickly ahead of me, passing the restaurant and headed towards another restaurant that we did not discuss. As he got us seated at the oyster bar, I hate seafood. I looked at the menu to see what I could eat. He proceeded to order oysters. The only thing that I could feed myself without messing up the sugar skull makeup were the blue cheese fries. He turned to me and said, "Why do you exercise if you are going to eat like that?" I was shocked and just stared at him. I told him that I exercised so that I could eat like that. I eventually started to ask him questions as to what happened to his prior marriage when he brought it up. In typical bitter ex form, he began trashing his ex-wife, saying that she deceived him and took all of his money. I had a feeling that there was something else that happened behind the scenes with their divorce. After he dropped me off at home, he didn't even go in for a kiss this time. I couldn't understand what suddenly changed and what he was such a jerk after making all of this effort for weeks since our first date. I began to Google him and could not find anything. Literally nothing, which was odd because he was known as a local businessman from his coffee shop days. As we were friends on Facebook, I happened to look at Messenger and realized his last name was spelled a letter off. When I searched that name, I finally found the domestic violence charge that eventually led to his dismissal from the local fire department. This explained his anger issues towards his ex-wife. She was the stereotypical trophy wife by all appearances. She was very fit and pretty by all accounts. I was shopping a few days later and saw this shirt and laughed, because it seemed so fitting of the scenario a few nights prior. So I snapped a picture and sent it to him. He didn't respond. He would eventually become open about his new relationship on Facebook. I was happy for him. She seemed to be what he was looking for physically, much like his ex-wife, Build Wise. He would continue to follow my travels and adventures on Facebook, often joking offering to be my assistant and carry my luggage. While I was out of the country, he would text me asking me if I could help his girlfriend get into my industry. I laughed to myself. The audacity. I am nice. I am not that nice. Here we are years later, and now that I am going through a divorce, he rears his head to message me sexy photos. My response was, "I don't think your girlfriend would like you messaging me pics like that, especially because I saw that they just bought a house together." He responded, "We don't have that kind of relationship. I can do what I want." My response, smirking, "Does she know that you have an open relationship?" It's always interesting to me when the zombie effect occurs in the dating scene. I am not exactly sure what happened completely, unless he felt slighted that first date way back when I didn't cancel my other date and wanted to treat me badly on the second date for that reason. Until that date, the only other horrible date I went on was my one and only blind date that a coworker had set me up on. The guy started the date asking me, "You're so pretty. I am surprised you are still single. What's wrong with you?" My response, Well, I do have a bit of a psychotic issue. If you're going to ask me a stupid question, you're going to get a stupid answer. Bear with me, this one gets a bit long. I had been doing online dating for a few years, meeting some nice women, but nobody with whom I clicked in a while. This particular girl was interesting, cute, single, never married, witty and intelligent, as well as very flirty in a seductive way. In short, the whole package. We'd never met though, because she lived an hour away, and neither of us was keen to drive the whole way, and there was nothing interesting in the middle. One Saturday night, a date stood me up, so I was online by 7:30. Soon after I logged into the dating site, aforementioned interesting girl messaged me, and we began chatting. It turned out, she said, that she had been stood up as well. She invited me to drive to her locale for dinner and a DVD. After some hemming and hawing, I was young and lazy. I opted for the what's the worst that could happen route and jumped in my car around 8:15, making record time and arriving by 9. I called her from the parking lot, and she buzzed me into the massive building in which she lived. Navigating the labyrinthine hallways, I arrived at her door and knocked, and out stepped a woman who fulfilled every promise her pictures held and more. She was such a knockout, I didn't notice at the time that she had closed the door behind her. We trekked back to the parking lot, where she insisted on driving. "You've been in the car so long." And we set off for one of the only restaurants still open in her area after 9 p.m. The conversation in the car flowed, unfortunately. Over the course of the next 20 to 30 minutes, she did most of the talking, and managed to tell me the following. She is not, in fact, single, never married. As it says on her profile, she is divorced. Her divorce is not, in fact, finalized, but will be soon, so technically she is separated, still married. She still has some feelings for her not-yet ex. In fact, they still see each other occasionally. He lives in his parents' basement. She suffers from depression, or as she put it, "Sometimes I don't know why I exist." About a month ago, when she was feeling particularly low, she went to visit him to have dinner and watch a movie. Her ulterior motive, she told me, was to seduce him. Her motivation for that motive was to get pregnant, because she thought that a baby might give her life a purpose. To that end, she had quite a bit to drink, they both did, and she neglected to use a condom. She doesn't like the pill because of what it does to her complexion. Soon after, she drove home, still drunk and still depressed. Arriving at home, she flopped on the couch next to her roommate. The roommate is her cousin. Her second cousin, really. This cousin was released from jail, assault and battery, 2 to 3 months prior. It seems he has a bit of an anger problem. After she told him what she had done, and he argued that she needed to go now, to get the morning after pill, so she didn't conceive. She rebuffed him and said she would sleep on the matter. She went to bed. When she awoke the next morning, her cousin was lying in bed next to her. Naked. Waking, he said, "Guess you better go get that pill now, huh?" She did. The cousin still lives with her. That's why she slipped out the door so deftly. Needless to say, I was stunned. Unfortunately, she was driving, so I couldn't very well say, "Let me out here, please, crazy lady." We soon arrived at the restaurant, and the rest of the night was very pleasant, all things considered. We ate, had good conversation, about anything but the items above. She drove me back to the apartment, and I hightailed it out of there. The next time I saw her was at a fundraiser. She was on the arm of a friend, whom I knew from being in that friend's wedding with him. She smiled and gave me a hug, and I grinned at her new beau as I shook his hand. Either he knew what I knew and didn't care, or he was in for a hell of a story someday. The boys outnumbered the girls in my high school, 16-24-0. Come prom season, the imbalance presented a problem. Joe and David brought their girlfriends, and Connor's dad set him up with his employee. Tom didn't even go, a wise choice. I was stuck with 2 tickets and no date. "Don't be like your father. The man didn't even go to his own prom," said Mom. I contemplated pulling a Danny Sr., but asked Kira instead. I typed and retyped the message until I overcame my anxiety and pressed send. She said yes. I was elated, but more importantly relieved. Seniors have enough to worry about. They don't need the added stress of prom. "Going stag's always an option," said Mom. "It is, but nobody does that," I said. By January, Kira found a boyfriend. "Now that you're in a relationship, are you still going with Dan?" asked Connor. "Of course," she said. From there I moved on to the next problem. Kira's unavailability made me realize how much I liked her. I longed for the taste of her lips, but all I had was Crown Royal. Could you pick your head up off the desk? Said Mr. Hawk, appalled a student dared sleep in the first row. I was tired, depressed, and slightly hungover. He could force me to keep my head up, but he couldn't make me pay attention. What good was physics when the girl I loved was with another man? Matt and Nick came over to my locker at the end of the day. We heard you're going to prom with Kira, said Nick. They slung every possible insult. Kira's too annoying, too flirty, too desperate, and weighs too much. She was infamous. Kira knew more people in my school than I did, and I actually went there. A couple months later, I was sitting on Connor's couch when I heard the best news. That asshole broke up with me right before my race, said Kira. She lasted 20 minutes before bursting into tears. Comfort her, said Connor, nudging me. Put your arm around her. At the time, cheering up women wasn't in my repertoire, so I kept my distance. Plus, part of me thought it unfair to swoop in right after a breakup. The month of May crept up on us while we were busy writing term papers, taking finals, and dodging questions about where we would attend college. Should I go and get her, or should I have her drive here? I asked. It would be nice if you went and picked her up, said Mom. I found Kira and her mother standing by the curb. They looked on in horror as I attempted to parallel park. Within 3 maneuvers, I straightened the car out. Matt and Nick were wrong. Kira looked beautiful. She wore a knee-length black and white dress. I wouldn't have remembered without looking at the pictures. I got a spray tan, she said, to cover up my tan lines from practice. Kira rode on the Sagamore crew team. The practices toned her muscles, and she lost a ton of weight. I don't know how you do it. Don't you gotta wake up at like 5 a.m. on the weekends? Yeah, I actually have to go and meet tomorrow morning, said Kira. Already nervous about prom, I managed to drive us home safely. Kira talked to my parents, and we went outside to take pictures. I rested my arm on the shoulder of the girl I loved. I don't know about her, but I didn't have to fake a single smile. The lady across the street complained about the length of Kira's dress. It was up to here, she said, slapping her upper thigh close to the crotch. I figured that was her way of saying Kira looked hot. Soon Connor and Joanna arrived, and we took more pictures until we had to leave. Is that your car? Asked Kira wide-eyed. Yeah, said Dad. The Cadillac used to be his pride and joy before we got the dog. Even dethroned, the car still enjoyed second place. By complimenting the Cadillac, Kira forever found herself on my father's good side. Dad drove us since limos were banned. To combat the culture of excess surrounding prom, the school hired a yacht to sail us up and down the Hudson River. Students dubbed the event Aquaprom. Watch your step, I said. Kira hadn't stopped texting since I picked her up. Can I have your phone? Mine's dying, she said. I need yours so I can put in this guy I like's number. His name was Connor Burr. I know that because I still have his contact information in my phone. Backup assist's a bitch. Last month Kira visited Burr at Iona College. He took her to a bunch of parties that impressed her sufficiently. How could a 17-year-old compete with that? Kira and I boarded the ship. We sat at a table set for 8, which was perfect since that was the size of our party. After dinner, the DJ started playing music. Kira took 15 seconds to deem my dancing reprehensible. She turned around and lost me in the crowd. I tried to rejoin her, or at least talk to her, but she was too preoccupied with her real friends. I left. On the way back to the table, I saw Connor. Joanna was grinding on him. She stopped only to grab his tie and slide the silk through her fingers up and down. I found Joe and Danielle sitting down, and Katie and David joined us within a half hour. At least I didn't have to be alone. We talked about high school and college. Another popular topic was how much of a bitch Kira was. Danielle went to school with her and hated her to begin with, so she was more than happy to explain why. I can't recall a word Danielle said, but I do remember how much better she made me feel. Hours later, Kira returned to eat dessert. She noshed on miniature cannolis while the whole table just stared at her. The desserts were better last year, she said. Kira finished and said, I have to go say hi to some people. I decided to follow her. Anything would be better than sitting at that table for another 4 hours. Kira combed all 3 floors of the yacht, searching for her acquaintances and in many cases, enemies. I have to find Matt and Nick, she said. If she only knew what they said about her. Eventually we did run into them, but they didn't have much to say to her face. We just stood there, not saying a word. On the deck we found Brother Peter. He was the only teacher in the school who knew me personally. This is Kira, I said. Brother Peter shook hands with both of us. I could tell he was shocked by how hot my date was. He definitely didn't expect that from me. To him, I was just the quiet kid who sat in the back of study hall. I looked into the ocean. Just for a second, I contemplated jumping off and swimming ashore. The worst part of Aquaprom was we were all trapped. And to make matters worse, the greatest symbol of freedom in the world was right over my shoulder. "Let's get a picture with the Statue of Liberty," said Kira. We tried, but none of them came out. I decided I'd leave Kira after she said hi to 50 more people. I stuck with her until she reached my quota, and then I returned to a bunch of empty chairs. Nobody picked up when I called, so I panicked until I found Joe and Danielle. I talked with them for the rest of the night. Over the PA, the DJs announced the prom was over. I found Kira, and we took our seats on the bus. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am." Kira repeated the question over and over. With each yes, it became more apparent I wasn't. A single tear dripped down my cheek. Thankfully, the bus was dark. By 3 in the morning, I finally was home. I told my parents I had a miserable time and went to bed. Kira used me to go to prom, refused to talk or dance with me, and then said hi to hundreds of people who didn't even care about her, all while ignoring the one boy who did. I wished she was fat and awkward and flirty like she used to be. In my mind, the way she treated me was somehow related to her transformation. Before prom, Kira hung out with us every weekend. But the summer of senior year, we only saw her twice. "Kira wants to come over. Are you sure you're okay with that?" asked Connor, a full month after prom. I said yes. Don't have a terrible, traumatic experience, but this was my first real date after breaking up with my boyfriend of 3 years, and it is entertaining in retrospect. So my coworker asked me out at the restaurant that we worked at together. I was a weirdo vegan art student, and he was a big buff engineer of few words. I was really surprised, but I looked at his arms and remember thinking, I bet he could do a fireman's carry, and that was the logic that decided. We met up after work at a burger joint that made vegan food. I was late, apologetic, and ordered a portobello mushroom burger. So good, all marinated in balsamic vinegar and basil. And he didn't order anything. Instead, he sat across me at this tiny steel table, and the first thing he said is that he hated mushrooms. They disgusted him as I sat down with my burger. I ate my burger as carefully as one can eat a dripping gray sandwich, and he drank 3 5-hour energy drinks. Engineer, I learned. Got off of work around 9 every day, programmed and built computers until 11, and ritualistically spent about 4 hours a day lifting weights. 5-hour energies ensured he could do this all night while nobody was in the gym. I nodded, what a good plan. After that, he really didn't say much else. He just giggled hysterically in a high-pitched giggle every time I said anything. I decided to take that as an opportunity to say whatever, eventually having a one-sided discussion about the sensuality of color theory. I didn't want to be weird because we worked together, so I agreed to watch a movie platonically as possible. Saw some uplifting Apocalypse Now. Midway through switched to Snakes on a Plane to lighten the mood. He just giggled, grinned, and I wanted to stay friends, but I knew he was nervous and would never talk back, so I said goodnight at 10 p.m. When I got home, my mom asked me how my date went, and I said, oh, it was okay. And then she gasped and asked me what happened to my teeth. My teeth? I ran upstairs to look in the mirror. There was the hugest piece of mushroom covering nearly 2 of my teeth to the right of my 2 front teeth. It looked like they were knocked out because it was black. Apparently that was totally fine with him. He asked me out again the next day. Okay, I won't call this a date, but since the guy whom we were talking about was convinced that it was a date, so for the sake of his mental peace, I will just play along. So I met this guy and found him cute and immensely talented. He asked me out a know of times, but things did not work out then, so one fine day I decided that I will go out with him. I called him and asked him out for a movie. He told me how excited he was to meet me again, and that too on a date. I warned him that it is just a movie plan that will do with lots of popcorns and nothing else. I am never late for anything, so as usual I reached before time. I called him and guess what? His phone was off. I don't want to sound all psycho, but I called him 5 times, but every time it was unavailable. I thought, I will buy the tickets and wait for him since it was a blockbuster movie, and the tickets might get sold out. I waited for a good 15 minutes when this guy calls up and says he is coming but still in a taxi. I called after 5 minutes to inquire about his whereabouts, but guess what? His phone was unavailable. Naturally, I was pissed off and I gave 1 ticket to the security, told him this dork's name, and described him as a short, irritating-looking lazy guy, and went ahead to watch the movie. I had already missed the first 5 minutes of it. In India, before a movie starts, they show advertisements for 15 minutes, so you can imagine how late he was. I was enjoying the movie when suddenly I saw that someone fell down, and guess what? It was my darling date. He did not stop over there. He started yelling my name, pretty loudly. Since searching for your seat according to the number given on your ticket is too mainstream. Being the good-natured person that I am, I responded, still regretting, and he came to sit beside me. Then the torture begun. He was creepily staring at me for the entire movie, singing out every romantic song, and praising me in every way possible. It was dark and I bet he could not even see me. Then the dreaded interval happened, and he started talking. I don't want to be mean, but I felt like punching him on his face. Just to shut him up, I asked him to get popcorns and 2 Cokes, but he got 1 Coke with 1 straw which he wanted to share. Obviously, I only had the popcorn, leaving the Coke to him. After a good 10 minutes, he stretched his arms and the popcorn tub, full of yummy popcorns, fell on me. Believe me, it was getting difficult when suddenly he asked for the second date, and very politely I turned him down, to which he asked whether we could officially date. I told him I needed time, and will text him once I go back. The longest movie of my life got over. It was a good movie BTW, but he made it intolerable, and I literally ran away, believe me, in heels. Never replied to the hi that I got from him on that evening. Believe me, I am the most polite person you will ever find. The most terrible experience I made on a dating website was getting involved too quickly and too soon with one of the men I had met on the site. He seemed like someone I could trust. He seemed a lot like me, white-collar professional, normal, steady. Everything looked great on paper, on screen, which is fine if you're interviewing a new employee. But even prospective hires need letters of recommendations and background checks. It was my first online dating rodeo, in case that's not evident. If he and I'd had mutual friends and acquaintances, my educated guess is that I would not have gone out with him a second time. If even a first, because one of those mutual friends/acquaintances would have cautioned me off. I have a strong hunch they would have said, "Look, he's a fun, easygoing guy and fine if you just want to kill time, but not someone to take seriously." I would have taken that to heart. Reputation matters quite a bit to me, and I like to think that my own is above standard. The biggest hazard of the online method of meeting prospective partners is that they really are complete strangers, just like people you meet in bars and clubs, absent the alcohol. They have no third parties to vouch for their integrity, character, and intentions. Think about it. In real life, we are introduced to new people through our extended social circles, friends, workmates, community members, etc. If somebody has a shady reputation or outre ideas about relationships, you hear about it through the grapevine. You definitely know pertinent details about them, like, oh, they're married with 3 kids or cheated on their last partner. Stranger danger is not something you need to worry about when you meet someone in the real world who is connected to people you already know. There have been many times when I expressed interest in a guy only to have someone in my social circle warn me, "Don't date him, girl." Because, insert dodgy tidbit of info here. Dating sites can be a great way to meet the love of your life. I cannot write them off just because they didn't work for me. But these relationships, I believe, must go very slow and take a lot more time to build trust. There must be added rituals of proof. What do their friends and family report about them? What about their workmates and former partners? You just need far more time and information, and I failed miserably, having not done my due diligence. I should have hired a PI to compile background information on the guy beforehand, because I wasn't just hiring an employee. I was looking for someone steadfast who I knew I could trust to be my wingman. Lesson learned: verify then trust. After I got divorced, I decided to try Tinder. I actually have 2 bad experiences. Nothing fatal or creepy, and no existential threats. It just sucked and convinced me to try the old-fashioned approach. Say hi to a girl and ask for her number. Free dinner. For so many reasons, I think that honesty is always the right thing. So when I met a seemingly nice girl and asked her out, I was just myself. She asked me about my work. I'm a lawyer. She asked me what kind of lawyer. I told her. And then she started asking me, "Isn't it expensive to live in Japan?" Of course, I didn't see where she was going with that, so I honestly said, "It pays well enough that I don't have to worry much." She ordered an expensive dinner, several drinks, and dessert, and I asked for the check. She stood up and said, "You don't mind getting this, right? You make a lot of money, don't you?" And she walked out, using Tinder to find clients. It's not what you think. After the expensive dinner, I decided to go for coffee on the next date. I met a girl for coffee, and she gave me her card. She was in real estate. One thing about dating in Japan is that some girls like newbies. They don't want a guy who has dated a lot of Japanese girls. They want to be your first Japanese girlfriend. So I thought it was a good thing when she asked me how long I'd been in Japan. Just a few weeks at that time. She seemed very interested about my work, what brought me to Japan, and how long I planned to stay. I was looking for a relationship, so these questions sounded like she was deciding whether or not to date me. We decided to meet for coffee. Coffee went well. She asked me more about my work and what part of town I worked in. These are important things because if you date someone, you don't want to be too far away. That can be difficult on a relationship. We decided to meet again a few days later. When she sat down, she put a folder on the table. Okay, when do you want to start looking at apartments? I found several that meet your requirements. She wasn't interested in dating me at all. Every question she asked was geared toward finding my housing requirements. I've seen a lot, but I didn't expect that on Tinder. I've talked to several other foreigners in Japan, and they all have similar experiences. I think another common one is girls who flirt to get free English lessons. They pretend to be interested and go out a few times, but when he moves in, she says she has a boyfriend, and she just wants to be friends. I think someone forgot to tell Japanese girls that Tinder is a dating app. He had hidden his face in his Tinder profile. His profile stated, "Serious people only. I'm 6'2", green-eyed, 86 kilograms, fit, kind and honest. Prefer to keep my pictures private for work reasons, but happy to send to you." Finding the faceless profile mysterious, I swiped right. He matched and messaged me on a Saturday evening. Andrew. Hello, I matched with you as I've seen your profile on different apps over the years, but with the age written as 37 to 40. My profile has me as 33, which is my real age. Me, maybe you've mixed me up with someone else, as 33 is my real age. Andrew, no, I'm certain it was you. We even spoke to each other 2 years ago, and I recall you were older than me. Me, well, 33 is definitely my real age. Or do you mean you think that someone has stolen my photos and set up a fake profile? Andrew, I'm not sure. Do you remember why we didn't end up meeting last time we spoke? Me job? Andrew, no. It's because I wasn't looking for anything serious. Me, that makes sense. I've always been looking for something serious. Did you have your pictures showing last time we spoke? Did I know who I was talking to? Andrew, yes, they were showing then. Anyway, I think I'm going to go to bed now. It was near midnight by then, unless you want to come over since you are only 3 kilometers away. Me, that's tacky. Andrew, why? Me, well, what do you think happens when you go over to a random person off Tinder's house in the middle of the night? Andrew, enjoyment and fun. Me, that's not what I'm looking for. I found that as a trend when guys raise sexual things very quickly, they aren't really concerned about what is in your best interests, but are very self-focused. Andrew, that's a fair call. I got lucky the other night. I matched with a girl at 11:24 p.m., and by 11:47 p.m., she was at my place. It was great. Me, why did you write serious people only? That makes you sound like you aren't after casual. Andrew, sometimes a person just gets exceedingly horny. Me, did you end up seeing her again? Andrew, unfortunately no. She suffered depression. When I undressed her there were cuts all over her body. Poor girl. Me, and you slept with her anyway? Andrew, yes. She was wild and spontaneous. Me, was she bipolar? Spontaneous and impulsive, but then sinks into depression? Andrew, how did you know that? Me, haha, homeland. Also my best friend during high school suffered it. I think that sometimes the people that have this compulsive sexual side, it's very exciting, but they tend to not be very emotionally stable. Andrew, that confirms what I thought. Me, are you emotionally stable? Andrew, I'm very emotionally stable, but completely emotionally unavailable. I have an insatiable sex drive, though. I've calmed down compared to my peak, though. Me, how many women do you think you've been in total? Andrew, 400. Actually, 300. No, wait a minute. It's around 400. I know that's messed up and not healthy. Me, wow. So that's like a new person every week? From what I've observed, I do think that when someone has slept with over 100 people, they tend to end up detached. In a way, it's like you've thrown away hundreds of people. Does your family know you are promiscuous? Andrew, at the most extreme points, it was 5 new women a week. No, my family doesn't know. I've gotten better with age. I used to view women more disposably and just ghost them. I'm better at not doing that now. Me, are you good looking? Andrew, I think so. Me, can I see a photo? Andrew, no, I am not going to show you for your curiosity. Me, why did you write in your profile that you are kind? Doesn't ghosting people inevitably cause hurt and treat people like they can be thrown away? Andrew, well, I'm polite and not rude when I interact. I'm upfront about what my intentions are. Me, do you know why you sleep with so many women? Was there something that triggered it, do you think? Andrew, yes, I know what's caused it, but I'm not going to tell you. Me, I hope it wasn't anything too bad. Andrew, of course it's bad. I mean, 400 women is extreme. Something bad would have had to cause that. It's strange as I'm so disciplined in every other aspect of my life, sport, job, family. Me, my Italian model friend jokes that a man is only as monogamous as his options. Have you cheated? Andrew, yes, I cheat on my partners. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. Me, how do you morally justify it to yourself? Truthfully, I can't really respect someone who cheats. It's so self-focused an approach. When you care about someone, how could you do something that could hurt them so much? Andrew, my sexual appetite is just ferocious. It's easy for me to get sex. Me, yes, you are the world's definition of successful, and you get girls easily. And girls can be silly in who they are attracted to. Trying to get attention from the guy that doesn't treat them well and is emotionally distant. Andrew, a girl I slept with the other week told me that. She said she was drawn to emotionally unavailable guys. How *********************** up is that? Me, I think it's something girls outgrow eventually. When they get tired of being treated terribly and realize they don't want to be with a crap human being. Andrew, haha, crap human being. Me, don't you ever want to be in love? Andrew, okay, enough analysis for today. I'm going to bed. Me, good night. Andrew, bye. Then he unmatched me. I wasn't surprised. I recently had one of my worst first date experience with a girl I met on Tinder. It had been a week of Tindering between both of us in which we never really had a long, meaningful, or substantial conversation. It had been a week of hi hellos and what's ups mostly. The only thing the girl stressed upon in our limited chatting was that she was not looking to date someone through Tinder/no hookup strictly, and was just looking around for people to hang out with and be friends with. Sounds perfectly fine, right? As it did to me. So here comes a Saturday night, she pings me and asks me to meet up. I was a little surprised considering we really hadn't talked much, but still agreed to meet. She asked me pick her up, and we went to a pub nearby in KP. There was a couple entry of 2,000 RS for the place, which being a gentleman I paid. No worries. We went inside and started having a drink or two. Realizing that I didn't have any cash due to the recent demonetization, I casually asked her if she had some with her, so that we could buy some cigarettes for the night, but she said she didn't have any cash. Now I started to notice that the girl who was just looking for some genuine people to hang out with, as she originally said on Tinder, was ordering food/alcohol of her choice on my money. That too on the first meeting. I believe by that time she didn't even know my full name. This dual behavior started pissing me off, and the beer had already started hitting me. So finally I hit off the golden conversation. How will you give me your share? Hearing to which she was shell-shocked as if I had abused her asking for my own money. She replied saying, I thought this was a date, and aren't you supposed to pay on the date with a girl? Me, does this mean you called me to pay your bill? You are also independent enough to handle your own expenses. Aren't you? Girl, this is so weird. Doesn't a date include all this expenses? Aren't you aware? If you really want me to share, so let me tell you that you go on and enjoy the night I am leaving. This is so stupid of you to ask me money. Me, sure if you think so, please go ahead. I haven't came here to pay your bills from my hard-earned money. She left and I enjoyed the night alone listening to music and drinking beer. Enjoyed my own company. A memorable night indeed. I asked for money only to judge what kind of a person she was, and luckily she showed her true face, which she was trying to hide by creating a facade of big shot party animal, cool, and bindas girl in front of me. I am happy and proud on myself about the whole episode that I had the courage to ask the right questions and act on time, and didn't become another puppet to fall for the trap of such cheap/dubious people around. I never really cared about what she would think of me. Wasn't image conscious for some time, and see it paid off well. I got to know the reality. Speak your mind and heart, it works. I am an engineering student who completed his second semester and went home for the summer vacations. After a month and a half of the holidays was over, I thought of trying something new and exciting which I have never done before, and hence installed the dating app. And now it was just too much to know some girls already, and also get to know that they are seeking to be in a relationship. Now it was time to try my own luck, therefore I liked a few girls, but guess what, I replied to only one of them. Let's say her name is ZZ. To my surprise, I liked her in the morning, as I installed the app last evening only. I got a reply from Z. I was at cloud 9, because I got answered at the very first time only. So we started talking. To my another surprise, she was actually the one for which I never thought of. We started talking around 5 p.m. in the evening, and talked till 2 a.m., as far as I remember, covering the snack time, and obviously the dinner too. I was literally enjoying her company so freaking much. At 2 a.m. we both were sleepy, so we wished each other good night and slept. When I woke up in the morning I saw the text. Good morning. Actually you should wish me this, as I was the last one who wished you good night. Seeing this level of cuteness, I couldn't stop myself from smiling, and I instantly replied, I am so sorry. We'll take care of it from next time. Good morning. And then when I thought I already found what I wanted to on the app, one asked her WhatsApp no. But she said she doesn't use WhatsApp much, so she gave me her Insta ID, and we followed each other. Earlier I thought she doesn't want to give me her number, that's why she said that, but later I realized it wasn't true, and she really doesn't use WhatsApp much. Our conversations later turned from hours to days. From days to months. Well, I missed to say this. I proposed her online only after 6 days we started talking, and guess what she said? YSSSSSS. That was one of super happy and exciting day of my life. She then gave me her number. We started calling each other. Every night we talked for like 4 hours at least. And to make our relationship more real, as we didn't meet each other, we started making videos for each other to show our rooms and house, and saying to each other what we want to face to face, which wasn't physically possible, as she lived in Delhi and I lived in Ranchi. Later my holidays were about to get over, and we were together for like a month. She used to cry that I will leave her, and I used to calm her down and making her feel better. Because baby, if you are seeing this post, it was not possible for me to forget you. I left for Bangalore. I know more far. But guess what? Distance couldn't break what we had. We even started video chatting with each other after I came to Bangalore. And we have promised each other that we will have a happy ending of what we started months ago. P.S. I love her more now. And I know now that I have found my soulmate. Thanks to the app. And thanks for patient reading. By far my best experiences would be where I matched with a girl, and we spent the first few messages getting acquainted. Following that, we started to grind out questions to make sure we were a good match. After about 45 minutes, we came to the conclusion that we wouldn't mesh well. We thanked each other for the time spent, and went on our own way. The worst experience would be any time where I'm pulling teeth to get conversation out of the other person. I tend to send multi-sentence responses or multiple responses at a time, because I want to talk and get to know you. If you can't at least give me one fully developed sentence, you're turning me off. Often I'll call out women on this. Hey, I want to get to know you, but your short responses are a turn off. And sometimes they'll change their ways or stop responding. I don't do it to be a dick, but rather if this is how we're starting off, things will not get better. Now I have had a few girls say let's talk on the phone because I don't like texting, and we continued the conversation on the phone. But simply stated, if I ask you, when was the last time you've been on vacation, and what did you do? And you respond, went to Disney. Road rides. I'm typically unmatching or asking for some sort of elaboration. Absolute worst experience was when I began talking to a match, and after exchanging numbers, she tells me she's married and looking to have an affair. No, I'm out. She then proceeds to text and call me, attempting to explain that her husband is away on business for the next couple days. Still not interested. So I end up blocking her number. Thank you, Google Voice. A couple hours later I get a message on my social media. Apparently she found my profile based from my Tinder picture, info, and interests. Very annoying, undesirable experience. Seeing as she had pictures of her husband as well as had him tagged, I said if she continued harassing me I'd send him transcripts of our conversation, then sent her a screenshot of her Tinder profile and conversation. She quickly apologized and disappeared. When I swapped numbers, I screenshot the profile and Tinder conversation for reference later on. That way I remember what we spoke about, and I can glance through the profile for more things to talk about later on. I've done this for all dating sites/apps I've utilized. Oof, get ready for a ride. And please remember before going on that I was young and dumb at the time, and that I am much wiser now. Years ago, I met this guy on Tinder, let's call him John, who looked really cute and listed his occupation as government employed. We chatted for a week, then decided to meet up. I, in my stupidity, told him he could pick me up from the mall, and we could go on a date from there. So John picked me up, and immediately I noticed that he had marks all over his face like he either had really bad acne in his youth or had been burned, which had definitely been edited out in his pictures. However, I decided not to be shallow because, hey, I was looking for love. I got into the car with him, and he says, I actually just got transferred to a new office in the city. Do you mind if I drive by it before we go out? I just want to see where I have to park my car and enter the building. Cool, I thought to myself, thrilled at the idea of this government agent taking me to his new office in the city. Sure, I exclaimed. Now, I grew up in New York, and at this time I had already been driving on the major roads for 3 years. So when he started heading towards the RFK bridge, I was a little confused. I thought he worked in the city? What government offices would be up here? When I voiced this observation to him, he said, Oh, yes, I do work for the government. The sanitation department. This is the point where I state that I have no issue with garbage men. They make a good living, with good benefits. But I felt deceived. I had been picturing a guy in a suit with a briefcase, impatiently checking his watch at a busy street corner in Midtown. Instead, I found myself in the passenger seat of a mid-sized sedan driving around a garbage dump in Harlem. It's okay, I told myself. At least you don't have to get out of the car. Suddenly, he pulls up beside a parked car, then throws his car in reverse. What are you doing? I asked suddenly. What do you mean? I'm parking. I wanted to see where the entrance of my building is, remember? Do I have to get out? Well, of course, he replied, shocked. I'm not going to leave you here all alone. Oh, so chivalrous. So now here I am, in a cute little miniskirt and pumps, standing on the sidewalk in the middle of a garbage dump. I text my friend John's full name, his car's make and model, and his license plate, as he takes my hand and leads me around the outside of the building, hemming and hawing over the hum of garbage trucks displaying their putrid contents to me. This is it, I texted my friends. This is how I die. After 10 minutes of walking around this garbage dump, John turns to me and says, Oh, I guess I have to feed you now, right? No, I said weakly. It's okay, you don't have. I insist, he said decisively, and without another word I got back in the car. I don't know what I was expecting at this point, but I was shocked to suddenly find myself at a seedy diner, with bugs hovering by the fluorescent lights that illuminated our table. John sat down, excited for food. He ordered a hamburger. I settled for French fries. And then, to my absolute horror, he reached out with his bare hand, scooped the ice chips out of his water glass, and chomped down on them with his mouth fully open. He proceeded to do this all throughout dinner, not noticing my mouth opened in an O of shock the entire time. We drove back in complete silence. I think he knew he blew it, because when he dropped me back off at the mall he turned to me and said, Can I at least have a hug? I gingerly patted his back, murmured, I'll call you. Then threw open his door, got the hell out of that car, blocked his number, and never online dated again. I've had many experiences on Tinder, some wild, some bland, but one still deeply etched in my mind. This was a good 3 years ago. I am from Singapore. I was 19 turning 20 then. I finished a short stint in the military and was about to go to college. My family wanted a good vacation, so we went to Tokyo and then Hokkaido. It was a good 18 days there in the land of the red sun, and boy was I having a great time with the food and the snow, haha. On my last day there, I decided to play a bit of Tinder just for funsies. Matched this local girl who was learning how to be a chef. She had come over to Hokkaido to work in one of the restaurants there. My family had a villa a little off the main area, so it was secluded. I was surprised we'd even matched, because there definitely weren't that many people around. Anyhow, I got her number quick like I always do, and we talked a bit. I was off for my final day of snowboarding, and told her I'd love to meet that night. She told me, isn't this going too fast? So I sent her a picture of me holding my air ticket, and she saw that I was indeed departing the next day, off the dates on the ticket. So she agreed that we'd meet, and we did that night, right at one of the bars near the foot of the mountain I was snowboarding at. She was sitting down, and from a distance away I could see she was looking around a little anxiously. She seemed like a shy girl. I walked right over, sat sort of beside her and said, Hey, you must be Grace, I'm Matt, smiley face. She looked so stunned I smiled immediately after, haha. She brought me to a small eatery first for some food, and we got to know one another. Then we headed to a bar for 1 to 2 drinks. It was getting late though, and transport after 10 p.m. in Hokkaido when it's snowing is non-existent. I had to be back early for my flight the next day too. Told you I wasn't lying. Not to mention, I was young and also a little less bold at the time, So I told her I had to go, and we called for a taxi. She seemed a little sad, but asked me if there was anything else I wanted to try in Hokkaido while I had the chance. I told her, hell yeah, I hadn't tried the ice cream yet. She took me to a nearby grocery mart that was open, and we got a small tub of it. It was snowing pretty damn heavily, so as we walked to where my cab was about to arrive, we had an umbrella up, and we were also eating bits of the ice cream. It was a short walk, but damn, it was romantic. She was holding onto me so tightly, and telling me she wished I'd stayed longer. At the alleyway we reached, my taxi was prompt AF. I hugged her and walked toward it. Out of nowhere, a snowball landed on my jacket from the back. I turned around. You're very mean for leaving me. I laughed, looked at the driver and told him to give me 2 minutes, and to just start the meter. I jolted back over and pushed her into the alleyway, just out of sight of people walking by along the streets. I took off my gloves, unbuttoned her jacket, gave her a kiss while feeling her up a little. 2 minutes of that, and I looked at her into her eyes and said I'd never forget that moment. That was it though. I truly had to leave, and all I have is this memory, and of her waving goodbye to me as I boarded the cab. What really this memory perfect was that it was untainted. 2 strangers from worlds apart meeting and having a great time together. When relationships end, there's usually some sad moments or even bitterness, but no, not here. I'll always remember how cold it was, and how the ice cream was even colder, while reminiscing how warm she made me feel inside. Likewise, she probably feels the same way too till today. Careful, this will hurt. First real experience, and the channel was between the 2 of us. Yep, really. To be honest, this is the naughtiest I had because it broke me twice, drained me of my energy and made me feel like SH dash. It still does to this day. Even after hearing numerous times, it was definitely his indecisives, *** loss. Met a nice guy on Tinder in late March, I'd say. Talked a little and quite quickly. He may have said it was not what he was used to. Asked for a video chat. Somehow, I was at some point stuck in Paris for a night without anywhere to go. We chatted all night long, so I guess that's where the attachment came from. Oh my, first time I got someone to act this nice and caring. I was then hooked, easily, and fell harder as the days went by. Still, we talk quite a lot about several things: life, marriage, how we perceive ourselves, the kind of things we like, and kinks. I tick so many boxes that we get along really well soon. Yep, I know, might be a red flag, but I acted as if it wasn't and chuckled like an idiot. Fast forward to June, where he mentions he may go on a date. I'm baffled and a bit sad. Well, in fact, really sad. I know about that time. Our conversations were steamy most of the time, but still. Talked a bit less. I was a bit worried, and here it goes. Frankly, it broke my trust. But I chose to go on, and even to let him go on that date. Mind you, I was in France and he was in England. So the date, from what he told me, is cancelled. He's sad for a few days, and then gets back sporadically. I still do it, but the magic is gone, and I feel like a second option. Which breaks my heart a little, as I trusted the guy. In July we finally meet. I was ready to punch him in the face and tell him to F off, but melted because in the end he seemed to be a genuine nice guy, very polite, with some conversation, quite the gentleman, and he, like I do, seemed to really like cats, having some privacy and awkward talks about trains or plug sockets or politics. At some point we share some kisses and a hug. Being hugged from the back for me is extremely intimate, so that meant quite a lot. All of a sudden he snaps, walks around a little, and goes back to his normal, quite affable self. Without any indication he'd like to do anything to me. We tell each other we'll get to meet again. I go back to my place with some butterflies in my stomach, and go back to France thinking about how I'd love to be around, and get to know him on the deepest level possible. There can't be any Issa there, right? Right. Then in August, I go to a nearby city. Mind you, around that time he was checking my social medias, lives, etc., but didn't interact that much. We get to see each other again at his place. Nothing, absolutely nothing, romantic happens, to the point where I freak out. When going back to the train, I suggest maybe I could stay a bit longer, so that we talk, and he bluntly tells me there's no romantic connection. I fell from heaven to hell in a matter of minutes, and Ugki cried like an idiot. Going back to France, we talk about that via messages. He mentions not saying things correctly, which makes me wonder a lot. At some point, after trying my best to understand what I did wrong, I send a message saying it's best I don't keep contact with him as it hurts. I tried but ended crying myself to sleep way too much. September ends, days are passing by slowly. I imagine all sorts of stories where he finds better women, more desirable women, this kind of stuff. Had lots of work to do, but focusing was hard. I lost someone I deeply cared for, was trying my best not to text. Then last October, I go back to England, pass by a city he told me wasn't so great. I agree with it, and somehow think it's the right time to send something, to get to know how he is doing. I get some message, where he said he couldn't cope with the hurt that last message in September brought. We talk a little, and all of a sudden he says he has to be careful about what he says and stuff, which is weird. I make him finally say what he wanted to mention, and guess what? That idiot mentions remembering us kissing on our first encounter. Because I'm talking to him, but also because it was enjoyable. So, as stupid as I am, I feel my heart racing again. I want to puke and scream at the same time. I feel tired and sick, but my heart beats faster, and I realize slowly I'd like to see him again. Just right after he says the same thing, he would like to see me again. Hearing my voice is good. This kind of things. So I go back to his city, choose to book a room and head to the city center, see if he wants to join or not. If not, I would have had fun to forget and make some memories. He invites me over to his place, even if it's a bit messy. And guess what? My stupid *** didn't see it coming. We share kisses, compliments, like saying it felt right and stuff, cuddles, a little more than that, even though we didn't have sex, to which I might be grateful today. And at some point, yep, you guessed it, snaps again, tells me he's worthless. I try to reassure him, I can wait, take some time, understand, leave him a little, and be there when needed. But he insists he's not really into carnal things these days, can't ask for me to wait, and so I go back to my hotel room, which was the worst of the whole trip to be honest. Once again baffled and destroyed from the inside, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. If I was too ugly, or weird, or available. I suggest we see each other again the next day. We do. I go to his place, and it's pretty much a reenactment of the first time he broke my heart. This time though, I don't ask for a hug. I go close to him, and we do hug a little. The atmosphere is tense, heavy. We go to sleep. I thought I'd be sleeping in the sofa, as he hates sleeping with people. But he says the bed is a better place. I go there and try to fall asleep, but sniffle quite a lot. That's where that indecisive guy kept me close to him. We hugged all night long, me crying and him being really sorry. That was pathetic in all ways possible. But still he hugged tightly. The next day I leave after him, leaving his keys in his mailbox. And then the messages. I went through the whole hate/love thing, being erratic and tense. He says I can't wait for something to magically change when it will not. And we clash a little. Then I go back to my friends in France. Cry, scream a lot, shout. And then my grandma died. And on that very day the guy, without knowing anything of that, texts me, saying he's sorry I'm going through it, saying he's having the hardest time ever having to face the whole thing, is sorry for my loss. And then nothing. I feel days later like talking, maybe in a friendly way to him, to know if his trip is going well. To be fair, also wanted to see his face again, read the messages again, like someone who's completely lost would. His answers are a bit short, he asks casual things about work. It sounds just plain. I feel a bit hurt but respect it. Sending messages sometimes, thinking about the worthless thing, and trying to find the words to heal, the words to make him feel better. Saying frankly I'll hate him a little, but would be there nonetheless after a while. As I tend to overthink, I try to understand the next days why, in the first place, I was so attached to someone who treated me this way. So I go back on Tinder, where he had new pictures. Some lines from his profile were changed. He mentioned not finding a match while being abroad, and my heart cracks just a little bit more, explodes, enters a fury I didn't know I had. I send a horrible message, then delete the mock and block the guy. Send one last couple of messages on WhatsApp and block him as well. And now, we're almost in December, I'm still in shock, trying to heal from the wounds. If only these were the only, and it was the hardest thing I had to face in life. But it isn't. Still, some days, life is a living hell, and I'd like to tell him to EFF, off again. But since I'm bad at hating people, it only leads me to the same ** goal of me thinking about him moving on fast. Having fun and someone to go to when I'm stuck there with the memory of his touch burning my skin and my eyes. The point of this story is, sometimes hell is filled with good intentions. Careful out there, protect your heart and yourselves before going there. Tinder is no place for people who think love is a construction that needs two builders to be valid. Yes, I'm an attractive Indian girl, and I've slept with a man I met on Tinder. Twice, with the same man, of course. Lucky man is what you'd say? I'd call myself lucky. Here's why. Having broken up recently after a serious 3-year relationship, I felt the need to go out and meet new people to overcome the grief of a broken heart. Hence, I started experimenting on Tinder. I had a 100% match rate. Not kidding, big confidence booster after being abandoned in a relationship. I didn't respond to most chat conversations due to upcoming exams. Just when I got done with exams, one guy that I had matched with a week ago messaged me. I was free, so decided to try chatting. What unfurled was a string of bizarre coincidences. Turned out that he lived in my building, spoke the same native language as me, was from my ex's college, was a startup CEO who had co-founded his company with my ex's best friend. Quickly we ended up chatting for a whole week, and then decided to meet down for a walk. The meeting was an absolute surprise for me. Contrary to his nerdy Tinder profile photo, he was extremely attractive, tall, and well-built. Woot woot! I quickly turned into a teenage girl, having a major crush based on physical appearance only. I have a huge thing for tall. Suddenly I was asking, who X? Winky face. What I liked the most about this Tinder guy was his unapologetic and unabashed stance about being a man whore. He was in a serious 4-year relationship, post which he slept with 12 to 13 women in a span of 12 months. That's a new woman every month. He's had around 50 to 60 matches on Tinder, which, from what I hear, is an exceptional hit rate for a man. He smoked, he did drugs, was a womanizer. He was the perfect example of my worst possible date. But that meant that I'd never fall for a guy like that. Ever. Which made him the perfect choice for a hookup. I've never been a hookup person. The only guy I had ever slept with was my ex, because I thought I would marry him. But in that state of emotional despair, I decided that I wanted to sleep with that man, that I would never see him again after that it would be the one wrong thing that I chose to do. I was getting tired of being the perfect girl anyway. So we had sex. Best night of my life. But turned out, he's not as much of a dick as he wanted to be. He was really sweet and caring too. He still continued talking to me on chat, and we ended up sleeping together once more. That was it. That was when I realized that I can't separate the physical and the emotional chords in my brain/heart. Women just aren't wired that way. I knew I'd fall for him if we continued talking like we did with all that physical intimacy. And I knew I couldn't fall for him 'cause he was the bad guy. And so we stopped talking. It was tough, but we did. How has it benefited me? I do feel guilty about having had sex with a stranger, but it saved me from immense grief and despair. It gave me excitement during the darkest phase of my life. It taught me that I could feel butterflies in the stomach again. It showed me that there are very attractive, smart men out there, and that I can do better than my ex. So, to the smoking man whore, thank you for everything. I still secretly hope that we could be more, but that'd possibly be highly toxic for me. And thus ended my trust with the man and Tinder too. Never to see them both again.